My name is John Buckley, the CSERT. A question before I start. You just said suitable time to respond to literally hundreds of pages. And the question tonight isn't whether or not we support or oppose the project, but whether the EIR is accurate. Is it 2 minutes, the maximum of work? Is it possible to get 5 minutes over so many hundreds of pages?
I'll give you 5 minutes, and if you need more, let me know.
Thank you. Okay, so again, my name is John Buckley. I'm the director for the Central Sierra Environmental Resource Center. And some of you, I heard people talking to supervisors beforehand that they do support this project. Our center also thinks that there's a very reasonable opportunity for a project to go forward here. But tonight our focus is strictly on whether or not the EIR provides the information that's necessary to meet CEQA, and also whether some of the things that were just presented by the consultant are totally accurate. And I would ask you to consider a number of those points. The first is that there was a mention of climate change. And with all due respect, everybody has different points of view as to whether or not you have personal beliefs strongly for, against, or whatever in climate change. But the state of California has identified it as a significant environmental impact that has to be mitigated. This project, by their own calculations that have come from the consultant, creates the greatest amount of greenhouse gas emissions of any project that our center has dealt with since calculations began a number of years ago. It's a huge impact, and no matter what it may be in comparison to every other project and producer of greenhouse gas emissions in California, it's a huge impact. The only so-called mitigation in this document is to say that you'll have to produce a plan. There's nothing to say that the plan will mitigate for 90% of what's the calculations, or 70% of what the calculations are, or 50%. There is a list of feasible measures. Not a single feasible measure is required by the EIR. You have no idea, neither does the applicant, to know what will be required, so the public cannot comment on whether the mitigation is accurate or appropriate. And that's just one of many deficiencies because that information is not available. We're not saying the project shouldn't go forward, but it is so easy to list these are the measures that the applicant will be required to do, or that the plan must be calculated to mitigate for 50% of the emissions that are created. It'll still create 50% more than the current, but you will have met the requirements of CEQA. A second example is that in biological resources, the consultant has determined that the loss of 65 acres of habitat is not a significant impact. If you have any other project that ever comes before your Board of Supervisors and they're talking about eliminating, wiping out, or adjusting 60-some acres of habitat, that would be significant. You would require some amount of mitigation. But the consultant says there's plenty of habitat other places. It's not significant. We're not saying don't do it, but you need to identify what is the appropriate mitigation and require that in the EIR. Some examples of the bias and inaccuracy related to biological resources. The consultants dismissed the loss of 1,700 trees as habitat enhancement. They say on page 3.619 that tree removal would occur in monoculture, old-growth redfir forests where the trees are unhealthy and little understory is present. Obviously, they aren't biologists, or if they aren't aware of the value that old trees, broken tops, cavities, broken limbs, mistletoe clumps, and other things provide not just for fur bears like Fisher and Martin, but for a wide range of avian species, migratory songbirds, and others. It's an important thing, and a representative of the ski area who met with me in an office over here with one of the applicants said they were going to be cutting at least 200 to 300 old-growth trees. We asked in the EIR, just tell us what those are and what mitigation will be there. That was never provided. There's a lot of other missing information about biological resources. Another example is on page 3.628. The exact sentence says, fishers and martins may forage within the project area. Habitats therein would not be suitable for damming, breeding, or other important behavioral activities. Our staff scientists and I set up photo stations on Forest Service land close to this area. We turned into the Forest Service last year a photo of a marten mother with babies. She didn't come from 15 miles away. It's just outside the project area. To say it's not suitable habitat, it's actually in the face of there. In terms of the water supply, we just saw a slide that says that LAWC has received the water supply approval. That is a conditional approval. So the EIR cannot rely strictly on that. At least it needs to discuss alternatives if that conditional approval is not finalized. There are a variety of other issues related to the fact that the tertiary treatment is not guaranteed, so the EIR should be discussing what other alternatives would be required. There again and again are reliance on future actions that are not contained in this particular EIR, so there is clarity for you as the decision makers of the public on how to respond. And a last quick example, because there's so many things I could take up more time, but a quick example is the EIR consultants say that with all this incredible increase of traffic, not just because of the condominiums and the very positive commercial that's going to be here, it certainly will benefit the county. No one's opposed to that. But they're saying that with all that increased traffic, there's not going to be any increased mortality for deer because most of the use of traffic will be in the summer and in the winter, and deer move the most during the fall. Well, our center has many, many years of experience with deer. Deer move up in the summer. They cross the highways, they get hit and killed. We often see them on the highway. In Tuolumne County and Calhoun County, more than 700 deer a year killed. To claim that there's no significant risk for deer and no mitigation required for all these tens of thousands of additional vehicle trips is just not accurate. So, I'll end because I understand I'm taking 5 minutes, but I would urge you, don't challenge the state of California to mitigate against this county for a failure to provide mitigation for greenhouse gas emissions and climate change with no specific mitigation. And don't create a vulnerable project when you can simply have your own staff and the applicants recirculate a revised EIR that provides the missing information and provides mitigation for the points that are essential. And within a short period of time, the applicants will have an EIR that they can rely on, and you, the county, can have one that you also can rely on. I'm just giving you, as I leave here, some photos of the fisher, which is the most at-risk species that is potentially in the area outside of Fair Valley. There were 2 sightings that our center was told about by the Forest Service. We came up and looked at them last year. We have not found them. But these are from U.S. Forest Service scientists, and it just gives you an example of a rare species that is of concern here that has been dismissed by the consultants as having any risk in this project. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Good evening, Shayla Stratton. I'm the acting planning director for Calaveras County. We did submit a letter in response to the FEIR and the response that the county and the consultant provided to our original comments on the draft FEIR. As was mentioned by the applicant, we want to make sure that we know that the county did not delay in responding to the FEIR or to the response to comments that were provided. We responded in conjunction with partners, COG, Calaveras Planning, Public Works, and Caltrans within 1 week of receiving that information. First of all, we would like to let the applicant know and the county know that we are very much in support of the project itself. We believe that it's a good project, that it would be good for both Alpine County for the Bear Valley area and for Calaveras County as well. However, we do not consider this FEIR to be consistent with CEQA or to be adequate or to address the concerns that we have, particularly in the areas of traffic, air quality, greenhouse gas emissions, and some general overall interests that we have. First, there is one comment that I'd like to make, a general comment, and that is a concern regarding the entire EIR. There are considerable references throughout the EIR to plans or programs that would be developed after the EIR is certified and the project is approved. What that does, in our estimation, from the planning department, not from a CEQA perspective, is it does not allow an opportunity for those plans to be reviewed by the public or commented on by the public, or any way to determine if those plans would be effective mitigation for the impacts that they are supposedly mitigating. The Caltrans, the COG, the Calaveras COG, Public Works, and the Planning Department met after receiving the FEIR and discussed the responses that we received. The Caltrans representative, Mike Robinson, has issued his own letter. I believe we received it today. The other three entities, Public Works, Planning Department, and the Calaveras COG, joined together and sent in a single letter in response. There are a couple of areas that were specifically noted. Those included the air quality analysis. We indicated that we do not feel that the EIR adequately addressed air quality. The impacts from this project do not end at the county line. The vast majority of the vehicles bound for the Bear Valley Village will traverse Calaveras County, and Calaveras County is in non-attainment for both particulate matter and ozone. These were not, they're both federal and state non-attainment standards, and the impacts of the increased traffic along the routes through Calaveras County on air quality were only generally discussed, and they were not mitigated to the extent that Calaveras County believes should have been done. The Calaveras County Air Pollution Control District does not have adopted quantitative air pollution thresholds. The FEIR used standards. They use standards from the Great Basin Unified Air Pollution Control District. We are not in that district. We use the San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution Control District standards, which are different. And we don't believe that the conditions, the plans that were proposed were adequate to address the conditions in Calaveras County, specifically the substantial increases in vehicle emissions that can be attributed to the project. We have concerns, as detailed in our letter, regarding the adequacy of the traffic impact study. We believe it is inadequate and fundamentally flawed. Previous comments that challenged the TIS, both its comprehensiveness and the ability to accurately identify the legitimate areas where mitigation would be needed as a result of the proposed project, were not addressed in the FEIR. This included westbound traffic in the Angels Camp area, West Highway 4, west of Angels Camp, and much of the stretch of 49, both north and south of the Angels intersection. We also have concerns regarding the way that mitigation fees and proposed improvements were developed. As we noted, we do not feel that we do not concur with the calculations for the appropriate rim fees, or that the cost allocations for those rim fees would adequately mitigate the impacts to our county. project-related mitigation measures must be in addition to the appropriate wind contribution. And Public Works did address these specifically in the letter responding to the draft BIR. Finally, greenhouse gas emissions and climate change. We find that the FEIR fails to present a greenhouse gas plan that is consistent with the provisions of Assembly Bill 32 and California Attorney General's direction regarding consideration of greenhouse gas emissions and impacts. No mitigations were presented in the draft BIR to target the reductions resulting from the project, the target reductions in greenhouse gas emissions that would result from the project either directly or indirectly, except for vague references to a series of future greenhouse gas reduction plans. Neither the draft or the final EIR make a reasonable attempt to address transit-based solutions, such as shuttles, park and ride facilities for visitors or staff. In addition, the transit options that were available at the time the project was initially proposed have since been curtailed or no longer exist, further diminishing the potential for transit-based greenhouse gas reduction. In addition, the segmenting of these plans into each phase of the project effectively segments the potential impacts and makes it virtually impossible to evaluate the effectiveness of the proposed mitigation. The listing of possible actions that might be implemented is not mitigation under CEQA. We did meet with the proponent and the county and their consultants in Calaveras County twice. We were not able to come to an agreement on what we consider to be adequate mitigation. Caltrans was able to come to adequate agreement for State Route 4 within Alpine County, but not through Calaveras County. We believe you have received that letter. It does echo the concerns of Calaveras County and the Calaveras COG. Collectively and individually, we do not consider the FEIR to have complied with the requirements or the intent of CEQA. We believe that any determination on certification of this FEIR should be postponed until we are able to meet with the proponent and the county and the consultant and solve these concerns, particularly regarding the traffic mitigation to what would be acceptable to all counties and to all participants, and that this it would be likely to result in a revised EIR that would require recirculation and an opportunity at one for comment. If you have any questions, Dr. Kevin would certainly be glad to
I'm so much saddened to hear Calaveras County say that. I know we work in Canada with Calaveras and Alpine, work together so often in Center Creek, and we just can't bypass well, helpful. So much surprise.
I can everybody on the board that according to your own procedures, you should probably not engage in dialogue with the person testifying. You can, during deliberations, ask for a question. You can ask a question if you have.
Just an observation.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, board, staff, and public. My name is Tim McSorley. I'm the Executive Director of the Calaveras Council of Governments. And Supervisor, yes, we have a long history of partnering with Alpine. Unfortunately, sometimes partners disagree. I want to echo what Shaylin said, is that we're not opposed to the project. We think that it has some very good benefit, not only to Alpine, but to Calaveras. But we also believe that there are impacts not been fully addressed, excuse me, and adequate mitigations identified. So we're here really just to ask that you postpone this certification until we can sit down and go over a little bit more in depth what our concerns are. I think our concerns are fairly well outlined in detail in the letters that you received. So we're asking really that you postpone this so we have a chance to really sit down and figure out some of these issues. But there are a couple of things that I want to point out that kind of highlight some of what we believe to be inconsistencies. And people are talking a lot about greenhouse gases. Greenhouse gases, the predominant producer of greenhouse gases are transportation related. We're talking about 2,500 cars a day coming up Highway 4 from Calaveras. Again, without knowing what the mitigation may be, or relying on a future mitigation plan, does not allow us to adequately address the issue. The other, again, kind of inconsistency that I want to point out is there was a proposed voluntary mitigation to pay for Highway 4 west of Angels Camp to the tune of about $100,000. That is inconsistent with the traffic engineer's analysis that essentially said traffic disperses at the 449 intersection in Angels Camp. So again, it's just a little inconsistency there. So again, we would ask that we just postpone this so we can really further analyze the impacts and identify the mitigations. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Are we allowed to speak in favor of the project?
Yes, sir. Just remember to write your name down.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. My name is Lance Makowski. I'm a business owner here in Bear Valley, a homeowner in Alpine County, and a realtor in Calaveras County. And I just have a couple brief comments. I would like to speak broadly in support of the project and comment on the Calaveras County opinions that you heard just a moment ago. And I think it might be good just to take a little step back and think about this in terms of the historical evolution of recreation and second home ownership in this area of Calaveras County particularly. If you look at numbers of visitors to the ski area historically, they're running roughly half of what they were in the peak back in the 80s, and you're probably aware of that. The predominance of the visitors to the ski area come from Calaveras County. The number of second homes in Calaveras County dwarfs the number that exists in Bear Valley by a ratio of roughly 10 to 1. The proposed increase in housing units in Bear Valley of something less than 500 keeps it at roughly the same percentage. And so what it sounds to me that Calaveras County, surprisingly, is trying to do, and I'm not sure if the folks here speak for all of Calaveras County, but it sounds like they've got their hand out for money to improve their transportation infrastructure that is largely suffering congestion because of the increase in the number of residences in Calaveras County in the past 20 years. So I think when we're when you're looking at the big picture of what's going on here, that's a perspective that might be worth taking note of. The relative increase in traffic compared to what we have today, if the ski area just went back to doing the business that it was 20 years ago, Calaveras County was enjoying or suffering, as you may think, the impact of that traffic during that time. So since then, the traffic has fallen off dramatically. The business revenue, transit occupancy tax, those sorts of things, sales tax revenues have also declined as a result of the diminished visitation of the ski area. And I think that Calaveras County is going to benefit far more than they anticipate by their hotels being filled and their business establishments being frequented and their real estate prices raising because of the popularity of the ski area as anticipated. So just wanted to point that out and hope you give that consideration in your deliberation tonight.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, we're going to move on to rebuttal. The applicant will be given a suitable time period to rebut testimony presented. And we'll go through 10 minutes.
Good evening, supervisors. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. My name is Whit Manley. I'm an environmental lawyer with Remy Thomas, Moose & Manley in Sacramento, here on behalf of the applicant. And I do want to respond to a couple of things that have been said. More than that, I want to respond to the concerns that have been raised by Calaveras County yesterday and Caltrans this afternoon. I share Chuck's disappointment. Supervisor, I share your disappointment. These sort of objections would be raised at this point. There is kind of a history in CEQA of using the CEQA process in an effort to gain leverage by threatening the adequacy of the environmental review process. I think that's unfortunate. I do think that Calaveras County and Caltrans both have legitimate roles in the process, genuine interests, reasonable views that need to be folded into the mix. And if the county, Alpine County, or my client took the view that those views ought to be disregarded or shunted or dispensed with or dismissed, I would object to that. The fact is, cars are going to come up and down through Calaveras County on State Route 4. That's what the environmental analysis says. And as a result, those impacts need to be identified and those interests need to be accommodated in some fashion. Now, I am proud of my client, candidly. I'm also really pleased by SCWA, your consultant, by Brian Peters, by your staff. Because right from the outset, there was an effort to reach out to those agencies, to meet with them, to make sure that their concerns were honored. Now, that does not mean that they were going to necessarily get everything that they wanted, because it's a question of working out a reasonable accommodation and honoring of their concerns. That's what it's about. There are competing considerations at issue. Based on the dialogue that's happened, it appears that nobody wants to widen State Route 4 to turn into a freeway up the hill. I've never heard anybody express an interest in that. So the question was, how can we provide funding that's fair to and roughly proportional to the actual impacts of the project and work out something that will provide real money that can be used by Calaveras County and Caltrans to improve the situation. And that's what this EIR reflects. Gordon Shaw is a very good traffic engineer. And if you look at his analysis, you'll see that it is very thoughtful. That does not mean Caltrans or Calaveras County are necessarily going to agree with all of it. But I don't think anybody who is fair-minded could look at it and say dismissively that it represents a bad faith effort. That's simply not true. It is a good faith effort to work out a reasonable accommodation of their concerns. And it will result in a contribution of over $850,000 for traffic improvements outside of Alpine County. That's real money. To me, I suspect to all of us. It's also significantly more money than Kirkwood is paying for traffic improvements, or that any other residential project in Bear Valley is paying. Significantly more. Now, I don't begrudge it. I think it's appropriate. I would have liked it if everybody could have sat around the table and worked out a reasonable accommodation of these concerns. That did not happen. Apparently, Caltrans and Calaveras County want more. Okay, fair enough. Maybe it can be worked out. None of that goes to the adequacy of the EIR. I think this is an excellent document, not only with respect to traffic, but also with respect to greenhouse gas emissions, biology, air quality, and all the other issues that you've heard about this evening. This is a very thorough document. It reflects the culmination of more than 2 years of work by SCWA and their staff. And to me, I confess, I am frustrated that folks would come up to the podium and say, we support your project. Well, of course they should. It's infill. We support your project, but we think you need to go back to square one and start your review process all over again. That, to me, is frustrating, personally. So be it. I would urge you to follow the advice of staff and certify the document. It is an adequate document under CEQA. It does not mean that the dialogue stops. We've learned in the last 24 hours that Caltrans and Calaveras County still have concerns. And my recommendation to my client would be to continue to meet with them and see what we can do to work out their concerns. I would like to do that. And it would be nice if the partnership could continue. It may be, ultimately, you'll have to make a decision against the backdrop of discord. So be it. But I would like to devote additional, I'm sorry, Brian, I'm committing more weeks to your advice, to an ongoing discussion that's been going on for 2 years. Perhaps you could take one more crack at it. I hope you will. I would like to work this stuff out. But I really do think a good faith effort has already been made. And with that, we really do encourage you, and we ask you to certify the adequacy of the document, and we'll move on to the entitlement process and hammering out exactly what the mitigation measures ought to do. Thank you very much.
If there is no further about it, we would like to request a brief recess so that we can collaborate, share your thoughts.
Someone else wants to speak? So we'll take a break for how long? 10 minutes? 10-minute break? Donald says, take a 10-minute break.
We'll take a 5
That
minute
means
break. We'll
15.
be back.
Staff report. County staff may make recommendations for findings in the staff report. We're going to close the public. Yes, we'll close the public hearing.
Well, actually, the staff recommendation can be part
Be a part of it.
Excuse me, wait up. Staff report is part of it.
So it's still open. Staff report, county staff may make recommendations for findings in the staff report. The board may adopt, amend, or modify these findings. The staff report should contain appropriate information, policies, and regulations governing the decision. The board may ask questions during the presentation. Questions to the applicant from the public must be addressed to the board. The board will determine when to ask the question of the applicant.
Okay, I'll go ahead and begin, my colleague just accused me of being a frustrated attorney, so I'm going to go ahead and take the floor here first. So the board's decision tonight, as you all know, is whether to certify the EIR. And in looking at the board's options, there is a process to certify the report and then rescind the certification of the report. And I'm going to explain why I feel that that would be problematic. It says here that the lead agency decision-making body can rescind and reconsider that certification and can even change the document's environmental conclusions as long as substantial evidence is in administrative records supports such a change. Which on the surface seems like it wouldn't be problematic in issuing a certification and then rescinding it until you get to the second portion of the discussion, which says, such discretion is limited, though, by CEQA guidelines, section 15065, which sets forth kinds of impacts that must be considered significant. So then we would get into a whole debate, or the potential for a debate, of whether the impacts are significant or not significant. So I would like to also rebut one of the things that was said by Calaveras County, in that there wasn't discussions, or there weren't long enough discussions. And I think there's a difference between not having a discussion or a long enough discussion and the two parties not being able to have a meeting of the minds, or basically one side of the table not liking what they're hearing. I was present in one of the meetings that we had here, I believe it was in July, with Calaveras County. I think even one of their supervisors were here. And the discussion was that everyone recognized that there were fiscal impacts of building the village here in Alpine County, but the applicant shouldn't have to pay for fixing all of Highway 4. Basically, those were the discussions. And to what degree or what percentage should the applicant be improving Highway 4? And so it wasn't that there weren't discussions, it was that there wasn't concurrence or agreement on how much the impact was of the village. So Brian's going to talk a little bit more about the recommendations that we're making, but those I just wanted to make sure that those observations, from my perspective, were clear to the board, that the fiscal impacts had been discussed, but Caltrans and Calaveras County were not in agreement and wanted for the applicant to pay for more of the highway repairs than I believe the consultants thought were appropriate.
Okay. I'm going to actually back up to something I said in the opening comments as far as the purposes of the certification hearing and the outcome. Obviously have options. The basic options are to certify the EIR as it's been presented, or to, the second option would be to not certify it, actually make a, effectively, it's not called a denial, but to not certify, or to continue this process and continue the public hearing. In the last 24 to 48 hours or so, we have received some significant new correspondence, primarily having to do with the traffic impacts, primarily the Calaveras letter and the Caltrans letter that we received late this afternoon. Also in the record and copies that you have is a letter that was prepared by SWCA, our consultants that responded to the Calaveras County letter and concluded that there were no significant new issues that had been raised, and that the EIR analysis with respect to the issues raised in the Calaveras letter, the EIR is adequate. The Caltrans letter is a little bit different situation. That's a 7-page, very lengthy, very detailed
somewhat technically complex letter that we didn't receive till about 2:45 this afternoon in our office in Marthaville. And board members, I think, probably didn't get to look at that until just this evening, just prior to the hearing, as well as some of the other county staff. We haven't had an opportunity to review that. We haven't had an opportunity to have our consultants to thoroughly look at that, and also to have the traffic, transportation, traffic consultant that prepared the traffic impact analysis review that as well. And Pamela just went over this option of certifying and then rescinding that is not recommended as an option here. Based on all of that, the staff's recommendation is that, of course, you can continue your discussion and deliberation this evening, but our recommendation is that you would continue this hearing, allow the consultant team enough adequate time to review the Caltrans letter and the issues and prepare a memo or a letter similar type of letter. We don't know what the outcome of that letter would be, but respond in the same way that they were able to respond to the Calaveras letter that was received a couple of days ago. So that would be our recommendation. Of course, if you do continue the hearing, you're going to have to figure out this evening a date, time, and location for that continued hearing. Of course, you do have the option as well, based on the board's discretion, to go ahead and certify. You have a resolution that was prepared by staff with findings for certification as part of your packet. So I think with that, unless either of you have anything to add, that would be the staff recommendation.
I just have a procedural issue to add. That is, if we continue the hearing, whether the board wants to also move into deliberations. And I would recommend against that. I think you can make a couple of comments if you want to regarding the hearing, but that your ultimate deliberation and decision should be based on the entire record, which will also include if you certainly have the option to reject staff's recommendation.
I have a question. Could you restate your first sentence there? I was distracted with what you just said.
What I just said. The procedures that are set out in your rules calls for a closing of the public hearing prior to the board's deliberation and decision. And so if the hearing is going to be continued, I would also recommend that your deliberations be continued as well. But that if you wanted to make a comment to the public regarding the hearing up to today, I think that would be prudent without being a board discussion.
So you're not encouraging a board discussion at this time?
Yes, sir. Except on this issue. First, I would first address the issue of continuance. If you decide against continuance, then you can go into your discussion and deliberations.
Is the discussion...
Well, go.
My only question is, if we continue this, is there a chance that a bunch of letters come in right before the next month?
Absolutely.
And if that's the case, I'd never be ready to vote then.
And perhaps the consultants can help you on that, whether or not they think that the issues have been vetted sufficiently that they don't expect too many more letters. But I can't really comment. It's hard to predict. Okay. So they're not making a comment on that.
Well, I have a question regarding your response to the Calaveras Planning and Public Works and COG letter. You feel
that you addressed it in your letter. I mean, I briefly read that this afternoon when I got here. Can you address that a little bit right now? Is it possible for them to address the response to that, Martin?
Certainly, the board can ask questions of the presenters. And they are considered.
Is there anything particular you'd like me to discuss?
Well, I mean, the issues that they brought up were the air quality, the traffic analysis, the greenhouse gas emissions, the use of the different air pollution control boards. You know, we had Great Basin in there saying that no, we should use another.
Sure, I'm happy to. Step up to the podium. Really? Okay. Is that on? That's on. We did thoroughly review the letter from Calaveras County yesterday. It was a bit of a crunch day, but we did it. And this is a summary of our response letter that we prepared yesterday. We don't believe Calaveras County's letter affects the adequacy of the final EIR, and this letter does not present any significant new information that would require recirculation of the EIR prior to certification. And here's why. With respect to air quality analysis, the final EIR air quality analysis is adequate because the EIR used El Dorado County AQMV's thresholds, which are more conservative than the San Joaquin Valley APCV's thresholds. The emissions from the project vehicles passing through Calaveras County are presented in the final EIR, and based on those numbers, they would not exceed either set of thresholds. They would not exceed the San Joaquin Valley APCV's thresholds, and nor would the entire project exceed either set of thresholds. With respect to the traffic study, the scope of the EIR traffic study was limited to State Route 4 east of 49 because project-related traffic impacts outside of that study area are expected to be less than significant, as detailed in Master Response 3 of the final EIR. And I'm going to summarize what that Master Response 3 says. Project traffic disperses at the State Route 49, State Route 4 intersection, making this the logical limit of study. Peak hourly traffic volumes generated at Bear Valley Village will tend to disperse over the day due to the long travel time and distance on State Route 4 to and from State Route 49. That's a 45-mile stretch of roadway. Opportunities for Bear Valley vehicles to stop along the 45-mile stretch of State Route 4 east of 49 for meals, fuels, and other reasons further disperse peak hour traffic volume. Roadway levels of service rather than intersection levels of service was used as an overall measure of traffic conditions on State Route 4 for the following additional reasons detailed in Master Response 3. Traffic on roadways intersecting State Route 4 is relatively modest. Most traffic on State Route 4 is pass-through traffic. Project traffic will mostly be pass-through traffic. The level of service at the State Route 4 intersections is a function of vehicles turning off or on State Route 4. In other words, State Route 4 is the main line. It's the driver. It carries most of the vehicles. And the level of service at the intersections will be a function of how much traffic is being carried on State Route 4. So for that reason, the proper focus for the EIR is the level of service experienced on the State Route 4 roadway, not the intersection. We also found that evaluating the level of service at 130 intersections, there are 130 intersections between the Alpine County line and State Route 4. Evaluating the level of service at all those intersections would not yield meaningful additional information, but would substantially increase the cost of the study. The key here is would not yield additional meaningful information. The final EIR did identify legitimate areas where mitigation would be needed, and that's on State Route 4 in Arnold and Murphy's for the reasons summarized below.
Traffic improvement in Arnold and Murphy's would have the greatest benefit. Focusing on Arnold and Murphy's is appropriate in light of existing planning efforts in Calaveras County to improve traffic along State Route 4 in these communities. The EIR's Arnold mitigation package was developed based on the Calaveras County Arnold Rural Livable Community-Based Mobility Plan. The EIR's Murphy's area mitigation package was developed based on Calaveras County's Murphy's circulation, pedestrian, bicycling, and parking study. So we picked, for the mitigation projects, we picked projects that are listed in Calaveras County's plans, because those would be most appropriate to if mitigating the impact. The ER traffic mitigation fees include design and engineering costs. That was a statement that was included in Calaveras County's letter. And in fact, I do want to clarify that the mitigation fees do include design and engineering costs. And mitigation measure TC2 provides details. The applicant has also volunteered to fund two specific Calaveras County roadway improvements on State Route 4 west of 49. The EIR's funding mechanism will allow Calaveras County to address specific traffic deficiencies along State Route 4 as they arise in the future, with costs to the project being proportionate to the relative impact on future traffic volume. With regard to the fair share traffic impact fees, fair share traffic impact fee is appropriate mitigation for certain project traffic impact because mitigation measures such as widening State Route 4 to include passing lanes were determined to be infeasible for those impacts. The detailed basis supporting the ER's method for calculating the applicant's fair share of State Route 4 mitigation fees is described in EIR Mitigation TC2 in response to comments I-11 and 12. In summary, this is how we came up with the fair share traffic impact fees. Traffic improvements would be financed in part by fair share fees that are needed to address existing traffic deficiencies on State Route 4. There are existing deficiencies right now. The project, as the EIR disclosed, the project would contribute to those existing deficiencies, which makes it a cumulative impact. The project will contribute only a portion of the traffic attributable to future growth. So the project only contributes a portion of the future growth of traffic on State Route 4, not all of it. The project is not required by state law to fully fund improvements, subject to reimbursement. There's no available mechanism to ensure that Bear Valley Village would be reimbursed if they were to fully fund the improvements. Fees paid by a project must be roughly proportional to a project's impact. Therefore, no single fixed approach to calculate, and this is very important, there's no single fixed approach to calculating project's fair share. I think Whit was mentioning this earlier. CEQA recognizes that determination of fair share requires the exercise of judgment, and we use that, and that the calculation may lead to differing results, and that appears to be the case, depending on the methodology used. The EIR's calculation that we use is based on informed input from qualified traffic consultants and engineers to arrive at a result that is roughly proportional. It should be noted that Calaveras County, let's get into that. As far as greenhouse gas emissions, the EIR lists potential mitigation measures to be selected in a greenhouse gas reduction plan developed by each phase of the project for two reasons. Well, for two reasons. The specifics of the greenhouse gas mitigation plan were not included in this EIR. Detailed designs are submitted prior to approval of the subdivision maps and conditional use permits for each phase. Therefore, detailed mitigation measures can then be developed applicable to that phase. Right now, the applicant's only requesting a general plan amendment and zoning change. They're not yet requesting tentative map or conditional use permits. So that level of planning detail hasn't been worked out right now. So it really is not appropriate for them to develop precise greenhouse gas emission reduction measures. The project build-out is long-term, and regulatory requirements and technology for greenhouse gas reduction are evolving rapidly. At each project phase, for mitigation to be most effective, it's important to select specific mitigation measures complying with the most current regulatory requirements and feasibility. And I will mention, this was a recurring theme in some of the testimony tonight about the adequacy of a mitigation plan having mitigation be development of a mitigation plan, and that is very adequate under CEQA. In fact, CEQA clearly allows for that. It is permissible under CEQA to defer the specifics of mitigation when feasible mitigation measures are presented in the EIR, which they are, and there is a commitment to implement mitigation to achieve a performance standard. In this case, for the greenhouse gas reduction plan, the performance standard is maximum feasible reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. And hopefully I've addressed your concerns, but I'm happy to talk to you more about it.
Well, I just also wanted to say that, we do have a long history of partnering with Calaveras and also transportation projects. And Alpine County has contributed millions of dollars for road projects, Caltrans STIG projects. And these projects were not done in Alpine County. They were done in Calaveras County. Our dollars were used to build a passing lane here coming up to Bear Valley. They were used for this Angels Camp bypass and also for the further down on Highway 4, a future project. And also in Amador County with the bypass of Sutter Creek. And none of these projects were done in Alpine County, and these are millions of dollars and over 20 years of dollars that we have forfeited in order to help the greater good and to partner. So it kind of troubles me that at the very last minute that we hear from Calaveras and Caltrans regarding their dissatisfaction with the communications. And we did have communications, as Pamela said, we've had many. And the two people that were writing this newsletter from Calaveras County did not meet with us because they're brand new, the public works and the planning person. So it just kind of concerns me that it's kind of a last minute shot at us. And I really value our partnership, and I'm very troubled by that. So I just want to let you know that.
Well, I have pretty much the same concerns. The 11th hour providing of information to this board where we're expected to make a decision today doesn't sit well with me. And frankly, I'm ready to not even take staff's recommendation and postpone this. I'm ready to make a decision tonight. Right?
I have to agree with Terry. Recollection of the district director of District 10 pointing on the Angels Camp bypass. And this is for Calaveras County. And I agree, I recall that conversation that you had with Calaveras County folks. And so there have been some ongoing discussions. And, Sutter Creek, the Tri-Counties, Amador, Calaveras, and Alpine have been held up at the state level as a model of cooperation. And we have used our STIP dollars to enhance transportation both in Amador and Calaveras. And to my degree in Alpine, I don't recall any projects happening in Alpine in the last 10
More than
years.
$20 million.
It's more than 20 years worth of our money. One of the other things that kind of concerns me about this is that Calaveras County is presenting their existing air quality problems as something that we can mitigate. And the highways, the state highways that are in any county in the state of California are available for anybody that wants to drive on them. I can't, in Alpine County, I can't put a toll gate at the county line and only let through 75 cars a day. If 7,500 cars that they want to come through, that's a state problem, that's Caltrans' problem. But it isn't the developer's problem, because he wants to make Alpine County better and increase business. I'm not satisfied with the information that's been provided by the opponents.
Just one additional observation. About 20 years ago, I think Eric and I have fond memories of working with the Trust for Public Lands and other cities to bring 15,000 acres of privately owned lands into public ownership. And back then we were 94% public lands, now we're 96%. So as we talk about 65 acres being eliminated, I think Alpine County's done its bit. So to speak. Those 15,000 acres went off tax rolls. As a matter of fact, last weekend I worked in Hope Valley with Barbara, helping out with the French Hope Valley. So I think the people of Alpine County, Bear Valley, have done their bit. That's just an observation.
Mr. Sweet? Nothing else to say?
Well, in addition, we're over 50% wilderness in Alpine County, 55%. I mean, I don't know too many other counties in California that are like that, or the nation, put it that way.
I just wanted to make one additional comment based on the board's sentiment. One of the phrases in here is when receiving information from a responsible party. And I would say that Caltrans is an irresponsible party for getting this information to us at the last minute like they did, but you know, they are the state. So I think that our apprehension and the reason for our recommendation not to try and to sway you from certifying the EIR tonight, but just so that you'll understand where we were coming from when we discussed the information that was before us, was that we didn't want the board to get hung up on and prolong the process for the applicant because of definitions like significant changes and going through all of these legal gyrations about rescinding it or you know, denying it or what the options were. So that was the purpose for our recommendation on delaying the certification, so that we can move through, you know, some of the issues which may be new, and as the consultant pointed out, the issues that Calaveras brought up yesterday we're not seeing those as new issues. What has the potential for being new issues are a couple of the things that are in the Caltrans letter that we got at 2:45. So I think it was kind of the recommendation was based on a sort of pay it forward approach, that we work through these little details so that we can then make a decision and certify if that was the board's approval or the board's position, instead of getting into a prolonged legal battle of definitions in rescinding the certification.
If we certify, we don't have to rescind the certification necessarily.
Let me just clarify a couple things the panel just said. I think the important issue here is making sure that these issues are addressed. Whether you certify or not, we're going to be responding to the issues raised in this letter.
Understood.
But the point is, we don't really know what will come out of that analysis at this be quite candid. We can, I mean, the Calaveras letter, I think, for the most part, raised issues that have pretty much been already addressed. And there was a time to prepare a written response, which I think addressed those issues. This letter, we don't have that time and opportunity. Perhaps it was irresponsible of the Department of Transportation to do it so late. But we nevertheless, it's now part of the record. We need to respond to it. So the question is, are we better off responding to it without having made a decision to certify? Because we don't know what information might come out of the analysis. Or are we better off certifying, and if new information comes out that indicates a significant environmental impact, then we may have to reconsider that certification. And so I think the recommendation of staff is to simply hold off on that, let the analysis be completed, and then come back and make a complete decision at the time. A single complete decision.
It's frustrating because they are screwing us up at every juncture, the state is, and I recognize the frustration.
Well, I have not had a chance to read every bit of this in detail. But frankly, the end of this letter sounds like blackmail to me, and I don't like it a bit.
Well, nevertheless, we've got to make an analysis of it and have a response. And that's part of secret compliance.
And it's your decision to certify, and we do the analysis before or after the certification. That's the board's discretion.
Well, I'm going to try. You don't have that. Well, I'm going to try. I'm going to make a motion to adopt the attached resolution with the findings included to certify the final environmental impact report for the proposed Bear Valley Village Development Project.
Okay, we have a motion to have a second.
And we'll have a second.
Do we need to close?
Yeah, well, if you, my suggestion was to first address the issue of a continuance.
Okay.
And then if you don't want to continue it, then make Skip's motion.
Okay.
Well, by making the motion, I don't want to continue.
If you want to revise your motion that you want to not continue the hearing, then that's fine. And then take.
Well, I'll make that part of my motion, that we
Okay.
do not continue the hearing. That we make the decision tonight.
Okay,
Second.
then we would need to, hold on, there's still a procedure, we would need to close the public hearing. Now, I'm saying bifurcate that so that you can decide to close the public hearing. If you reject staff's recommendation, which is fine, that's certainly your prerogative, make that motion and then close the public hearing and then move on to the second one about.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, we'll be off tape for a moment.
Okay, then we have a motion to reject staff's. That's the reason reject
I would-
staff's recommendation.
I would request that Supervisor Beach withdraw his motion
Process motion.
and then make a motion either to continue or not to continue.
Okay. So I'll withdraw the motion,
Thank you.
Okay, motion withdrawn.
and I will make a motion to close the public hearing.
Motion. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Against? Opposed? One against? Motion carries.
Okay. I will now make my motion to adopt the attached resolution with the findings included to certify the final environmental impact report for the proposed Bear Valley Village Development Project against staff's recommendation.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve without staff's recommendations. Resolution. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Against? Motion carries.
Just observation. planning will, and our consultant and the project proponent will have to address the issues within this, certainly sooner rather than later, and before we talk about any of the plan amendments and all this. So it's not like we're ignoring it, it's just showing up 2 hours, 3 hours before a meeting. And they had an opportunity during the draft document comment period. I mean, this just didn't fall out of the sky yesterday.
No, today at 2:45.
Well, just did.
If the analysis is that there are significant environmental impacts, we'll have to reconsider the certification. Or we'll bring that back.
Okay, so we finished, accomplished what we're here for. So we'll go to adjournment. The board will adjourn to the next regular meeting on Tuesday, June 2nd, 2009 at 8:20 a.m. at the County Administrative Office Building, Margaretville, California.